Anyways, welcome everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. Sean from New Orleans. Fantastic. Yeah, welcome. Oh, India. Okay. Hawaii. Wow, Tammy, Hawaii. Fantastic. Oh, South Korea. Tony from South Korea. Okay. Copenhagen, Georgia, the country. Yeah, Georgia's a really small country. It's really small. Isn't it one of the smallest countries in Europe? New York City, Mexico, Alex. Adesh from India. Minneapolis. Oh, Green Hills of Western Massachusetts. That's very specific. I like that. Brazil, yes, Marco. And Chicago. Fantastic. Okay, so we'll leave June to resolve a lot of these. But yeah, we can just use the Q&A as a chat function. Welcome everybody. My name is Mike Pitt. I'm a part of the community team here at Zeppelin. A lot of what I do is just finding stories in our community, people who are pro users of Zeppelin or using Zeppelin in interesting ways. And I find their stories, I talk to them, and then June and I here will create content with them. So it could be a video, it could be a blog. But basically what we're trying to do is share the best practices of our community with our community. So yeah, it's always great to chat with everybody, great to see everybody. And if you have ideas or you want to share your process and help others out, then message me on LinkedIn. I'm Michael Pitt at Zeppelin. And maybe next time you'll be here with me. Cool. Yes, so some Zoom logistics. This isn't office hours. We want to make it as collaborative as possible. If you have questions, obviously you can't use the chat. So put them in the Q&A. And then I'll be answering a lot of them live. The ones that I don't get to, June will answer. And we also have a Discord where, we have lots of members from the community. And that's where June and I will interact with you. And that's where you can learn from your peers and or teach them. Great. All right. So today we're going to talk about components. And we're going to talk about a couple different items related to components. The first is just access to your components. So the ability to give your entire team access to your UI kit. The second is going to be organization of your UI kit in your design tool and in Zeppelin. From there, we'll move to surfacing components on your screen and really understanding the different elements of those components. So the properties, the states, the dependencies of those components. And if we have time, then we can talk about connecting your components to code. Okay, great. So let's talk about access to components. So one of the things that we've heard at Zeppelin is, it's difficult for those people who aren't designers, so developers, PMs, even marketers, legal. It's difficult for those people to have access to all of your components. And while they might have access to, say, all the screens in your project, in design tools, it's difficult for these people to find the UI kit. And so it might be in a different page in that file like we see here, or it might be in an entirely different file. It might be in a library that's restricted to a set few. But basically, all these different people, they need access to your UI kit to understand what is in your design system, what isn't. And just getting access, just understanding what those components are, that can be difficult for your team members. So the cool thing about Zeppelin is it's easy to give everybody the information they need about your components. And we can do that by exporting our buttons to Zeppelin. So I'll just select a couple here. And we'll just go ahead and move them over to Zeppelin. This is Figma, but it works similarly in Adobe XD and Sketch, just moving your components or your screens over to Zeppelin. I'm just going to unselect this because if I don't, then I'll automatically export to the most recent projects. And I click export. From here, I can select the type of workspace. So if you're part of multiple workspaces within your company, and then here are all of my projects too. So I have my Snacks app, and I can search at the top if I have lots of projects. And we're just going to export that. So what Zeppelin is doing here is we're checking over the entire file. We're looking at the images in your components, seeing if they're exportable, and if they are, changing them into different formats. We're sending all of that to the back end of Zeppelin, and then obviously we're uploading it to the front end too. So let's go ahead and open this up. Boom, there we go. So we're in the Style Guide tab right here. Just want to notify you that. The dashboard is where we have all of our screens, and then the flows is where we're documenting our user flows. But this is a style guide, and the style guide is a repository for all of your colors, all of your text styles, your spacing tokens, and your components. And a style guide, it contains all these elements, but it also applies it to all the different projects across Zeppelin. So the cool thing about style guides is you can export components into it once, and then you can apply those elements across many, many different screens. Cool. So that's access right there. What might be hidden in your design tools is easily to find in Zeppelin. It's right next to all the different elements that you need to start building your project. Does anybody have any questions about that? Let's see if any popped up here. Okay, we'll move on. So organization. In my UI kit, in my design tool, this particular UI kit, it's not super organized, right? But it's something that you actually might find commonly in design tools is that, as designers, we just put all the components in one place, then we want to move on to designing the fun part. But organizing these is, a little manual in our design tool and can be a little burdensome. So, a lot of the time we'll create these text fields to organize our different components. So maybe, these are our primary and secondary buttons. Okay. Oops. And we'll just change the size here so that it's more recognizable. Great, so we'll create these text layers. That's how we organize our buttons, or maybe we're using variants in Figma or other methods in Sketch or XD. But basically doing this over and over again and updating it with all these different buttons, it becomes burdensome, it becomes manual, and it takes up a lot of our time. So in Zeppelin, it's a little bit faster. When I export all of my components into Zeppelin, I can just search for, a layer name that is common to all of them. So for example, my icons, I can create a section from them quickly, and boom, there we go. Now they're all organized. I can do the same for my buttons. Select them all, create a section, and add my buttons there. Now, not only that, but I have all these sections now created, and it's kind of this neat way. I like to think of it as, your style guide is like your room, and putting all your components in these sections is like putting your clothes away in your drawers, right? When they're all nice and neat and closed, it looks beautiful. And then you can pop open your drawers or your sections and see what's inside. Now you can see sections here, and you can also see them on the left-hand side. You can even reorganize them on that side too. Okay, it seems like we got a question or two. Okay, so Julian is asking, why are we not using Figma variants before the export? Yes, good question. So Julian is actually setting up my next point. Clearly, Julian is a mole that I've planted in the chat to help me along. So appreciate that. And thanks for answering the other question, Julian. I really want to encourage people to try to answer these questions that are in the Q&A. And also, if you get into our Discord, please do that too. So thanks, Julian. So why are we not using Figma variants? So Julian, we actually are using Figma variants. You might have noticed that I selected some other elements here, some steppers, some toast messages. And when we export those into Zeppelin, they actually automatically come in as variants in Zeppelin. So we had these properties set up in Figma, and now they're automatically exported into Zeppelin. I just wanted to show that, you know, these can not be variants or states like they can be in Sketch, and you can still use some of these features in Zeppelin. So let me show you what variants looks like in Zeppelin 2. So we have these buttons, we create a section. You might notice that there's this icon here in the right-hand corner. And what this does is it'll set this section as a variant section. When we click it, Zeppelin, from the naming convention of these buttons, so say the / naming convention, we'll try to figure out what the type, the property, and the state of these buttons is. So this is actually an icon here. Ooh. So let's change that. And so what this does is it creates this variant section, and I can actually filter based on the type of button that I'm looking for. So maybe it's my primary, maybe it's the one that has an icon, and I want it to be disabled. Boom, I find that button right there. But it's this extra layer of hierarchy and organization in my style guide that I can apply to either Sketch or XD or Figma. And if you have variants set up in Figma, then it comes in automatically, like I showed before. Hope that helps, Julian. Yeah, Julian's having a good time in there. Yeah, so Adriana is asking, is there a naming convention to follow for components export? You know, I would say it depends on you and your team. You know, here you can see in our design tool that we're using a buttons primary, icon true or false, and then the state of the buttons, so default pressed or disabled. I think that's kind of the usual way that people are naming buttons, with primary, secondary, tertiary, you know, warning, that coming first in the / naming convention. And then from there, I think it's up to the design team. What I might suggest, Adriana, is that you talk with not only your design team, but your development team, and come up with a naming convention that will notify not only your designers, but your developers too, of what that button exactly is. And if anybody else has some naming convention that they use, they can tell Adriana. Maybe that would be helpful. Okay, cool. Let's keep moving here. Yeah, we got 12 minutes, so let's keep going. All right, so that's a little bit of organization in our style guide. What I want to show you next is how to surface these components and how to understand them in Zeppelin. So I'm going to hop back over to Figma, and we're going to go back to our lovely screens, our lovely baklava. And something that we've heard before is difficult for developers and even others on the team, like PMs, is when I look at this screen in my design tool, I want to instantly understand what are the building blocks of this screen. And when I say building blocks, I mean what pieces of this screen are components, right? So I just want to look at it and I just want to see like, okay, these are the reusable elements right here, and these are not the reusable elements. So if I'm coding it, I can just go grab those from my repo, put it in my file or my project, and speed up my development cycle. But in a design tool, what you have to do is, you have to either hover and it'll give you these overlays. So a blue meaning no component and a purple meaning a component. And this is similar in XD and Sketch 2. But basically you hover over as a dev and you try to figure out what is and what isn't a component. And now I can just hover over like that, but I actually have to click into different layers to understand what's a component within a component. And that's really important. If I'm using something like React, often components are nested. And in design too, it's very common, right, to have these reusable elements nested. So it could be difficult for me as a developer to click into all these layers and to see, okay, this is a component, this isn't. And it just feels like I'm guessing to see what is and what isn't a component on my screen. So we heard that was a big problem, and we just wanted to show all the components on a screen instantly and make it easy for you to have that intuition of how is the screen actually built out. So if we go to our dashboard view here, this will contain all of our screens, and it has a similar organization structure to my style guide where you can create sections, but as opposed to components, you're putting screens in here now. So I can hop into the screen that we were looking at. And if I want, I can quickly just hit Command-Option-C and boom, there we go. I've got these overlays now on my screen that instantly tell me not only what is a component, but the different colors tell me where it's coming from. And I can see components within components too. So all those problems I was having, clicking around, trying to find a component, playing a little bit of where's Waldo, it's no longer an issue when I'm looking at this screen. So the gray overlay is telling me that this is just from my Figma file. The blue is telling me it's actually from a style guide. So it's probably a part of my design system already, and I can just go grab it. As opposed to the gray one, which maybe is a one-off component or hasn't been added to my style guide or my design system yet. And I might need to, create a button myself because of that. Okay. I just want to do one or two more things and then I'll take a couple questions. Besides seeing all the components on the screen here and surfacing them, you can use that shortcut, but also there's this drop down where you can show all your components, the ones connected to code or the ones not connected to code. In the right-hand side here, I can see all those components that are on the screen. So there's that card and our nice, beautiful button that we saw before. All right. So I'll stop there and see if we have questions in the Q&A. Okay, let's see. Okay, can Zeppelin pull properties from the new component properties feature in Figma, or are properties solely pulled from component variants? Yeah, so Caitlin, I think what you're talking about here is the variance feature in Figma, like so. And basically, this variance feature in Figma allows you to, define some kind of, properties or states. We saw the icon Boolean that people were talking about before, true or false. And I think Caitlin is asking here, does Zeppelin pull in this information when we're exporting from Figma? The answer is yes. So all this information is available to Zeppelin, what you define as properties in variants in Figma. and we just pull that in to Zeppelin automatically. Does that answer it for you, Caitlin? Cool. All right, we got 5 minutes. Let's keep chugging. Got lots of stuff to show. All right, so we've talked about access, we've talked about organization, surfacing those components, seeing them on the right-hand side. The next thing I want to talk about is a little more nuanced, and it's understanding the dependencies of your components. And what do I mean by dependencies? Basically, when you're building a screen, say I have this add to shopping cart component here. If I change this component, either as a designer or maybe as a dev, I want to make some changes to my code, I need to understand, if I change this component, how is it going to affect the other screens that this component is used in? So for example, maybe I change the color, and that's fine on this screen, but on a different screen, it means that when I change the color of this component, it no longer meets our accessibility requirements. Or I expand the button, I make it bigger, and it's fine on this screen once again, but on a different screen, it's overlaying an element. So when I'm changing this component, how do I understand its dependencies? And if I change it, how do I know if that's going to mess something up on my other screens? Basically, we were hearing a lot about this in Zeppelin. And you can see when I select this component, I have some information on the right-hand side. We mentioned it's from my design system. We have some information about the properties. And then we have this piece used in 19 screens in 4 projects. And other variants are used in 19 screens. So if we click this little icon here, we can actually see where this particular variant of this button, what screens it's used in. Not only that, but I can see other variants of this button and where those are used in this project. But we go one step further. Beyond this project in Zeppelin, I can see where this button is used in other projects. So instantly, I understand if I change this button in some way, here are all the screens that are going to be affected by that change. And is that going to mess up my other screens? Is it going to overlay other elements? Is it going to ruin my accessibility? You can see that information in the right-hand side here when you select a component. Nobody really does that, so it's pretty cool. All right. Great. The last thing about components across screens and across projects, if I want to communicate something that's changing in a component, I can just command click and I can add an annotation here. And maybe I can say, hey, does this meet access requirements? And I can link it to that component right here. This button's primary true default. And I post it. And now not only is this annotation available on this screen, but it's available on all the screens that this button shows up on. So not only do I understand the dependencies, but I can communicate to my other team members who are working on these other screens that, hey, something is changing on this button and you should be aware of it. Great. All right, I'm just gonna answer some questions here. We have 1 more minute and I want to be on time. Tony, so Tony's asking about the annotations feature. I'll just show you, Tony, what some annotations look like here. So we have an animation one, a couple of behavior ones, and you can see them on the right-hand side here and filter them. But basically, there's a bunch of different types of annotations that you can use. Okay, folks, we're just about at time here. June, would you be able to put the Discord potentially in the Q&A here, or maybe I can add it. I'm just going to add it to Julian's question here. If we didn't get to answer your question, hop over to Discord. We'll be hanging out there for the next hour or half hour or so, and we'd love to talk about your workflow. And yeah, just talk with the community. So you can teach us, we can teach you, and we can all teach others. So thank you everybody for joining today. Sorry about the chat, but like I said, join the Discord, and there we can chat and keep the conversation going. All right, thanks, bye. Want more Zeppelin videos? Check these out and subscribe for regular updates.